This video is sponsored by Surfshark. On June 21st, what seemed like a follow-up to the Forbes hit piece on Disney and Lucasfilm from March was published in The Atlantic. In a piece titled How Disney Mismanaged the Star Wars Universe, Disney in general and Kathleen Kennedy's Lucasfilm in particular are put on blast. But one glimmer of hope is highlighted. Namely Jon Favreau's The Mandalorian. This article is unlikely to have been written on a whim. Instead, it has all the hallmarks of being carefully planned and orchestrated. Joining me in dissecting this article is the same man who has helped us decipher earlier articles documenting the shifting balance of power behind the scenes of Lucasfilm. Namely, writer, producer, and former journalist Kamran Pasha.
It's great to see you, Andre. I'm delighted to be back on Midnight's Edge, and this article is quite interesting, and I'm delighted to go over it with you and to discuss its context.
That context will indeed be explored in depth, for in this video, we will begin by establishing why this article is printed specifically in The Atlantic, as opposed to one of the trades, what the article says and the real meaning behind that, and finally, why it might be released now at this point in time. However astounding it may be that the mainstream media are now covering that Star Wars has indeed been mismanaged. Audiences were obviously well aware already. Hashtag Cancel Disney Plus has been trending for a while now, and many are expressing their desire to take to the high seas to get the Disney content they want, such as Marvel's Loki and the upcoming Black Widow. Please note that this is something neither Midnight's Edge, our sponsors, nor any other affiliates condone. Not only is piracy wrong, you'd be exposing yourself to endless spyware, tracking software, and other malware out there on the high seas. And that's on top of all the data that is stolen from you during all your regular browsing. Well, modern problems require modern solutions, and many of them can be found in a VPN, such as the one delivered by this channel sponsor, Surfshark. A VPN, or Virtual Private Network, is a privacy protection tool which guarantees instant online safety and encrypts all data sent via the internet. On top of that, Surfshark allows you to bypass geo-blocking restrictions by changing the country you access the internet from, which also gives you access to 15 different Netflix libraries by simply changing your virtual location. Not only that, outside of the US, Star, the international version of Hulu, comes bundled with Disney+. If you're in the US and change your location to, say, the UK, well then you might just get that too. One of the advantages with Surfshark over many other VPN providers is that it allows one account to be used on unlimited devices. That's part of the reason why Surfshark is the VPN of our choice, and it gets even better. If you type in the code MIDNIGHT when ordering, that triggers an exclusive offer in which you now get 83% off the normal list price, plus 3 extra months for free. Surfshark also offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk in trying it out. Do check out the link in the description below for further details and to order. With that, let's dive into how The Atlantic is calling out Disney over its Star Wars mismanagement. And the first question on that note is, why The Atlantic? Why not Forbes or the industry trades?
Well, the other publications you mentioned have very specific purposes. Forbes is obviously meant to be targeting major investors, and so that was the audience for that article. The trades are meant to give the sort of official corporate narrative, which we saw with the Hollywood Reporter discussion of Mr. Chapek taking back control of Disney and butting heads. But now we've got The Atlantic. The Atlantic is important because it is one of Hollywood's major cultural milestones, like the New Yorker is, for example. And The Atlantic serves as something that is the official sort of mainstream perspective that Hollywood is supposed to embrace. and supposed to promote. So, for example, this past year, it was The Atlantic that promoted the official position on the events of the past year, on the medical issues, on the legal issues, the lockdowns, and it took very strong positions on that, which were largely regurgitated by industry members because it was their cultural icon. So The Atlantic to start talking about Star Wars means that the industry is being signaled that now it is not just an internal discussion as it was with investors, an internal discussion within the system as it was with the trades. Now it is going to be the official narrative that's going to be put out to the world. So Hollywood has to now promote that narrative to the world. That's the purpose of The Atlantic.
We refer to this Atlantic piece as an article, but it's actually shaped as an editorial, i.e. an opinion piece. What is the significance of that?
Well, what it is it gives cover to The Atlantic so that it's not seen as a hit piece. You could argue that Forbes and the Hollywood Reporter could be seen as hit pieces, which is what they were. And this is meant to be. This is just where everybody's opinion is now, because again, this is the cultural. The Atlantic is the cultural milestone of the industry, and so this is where everyone's opinion of the general populace, or at least the general populace of the populace that the industry claims to care about, right? Sophisticated coastal elites. That's the perspective. And so the editorial represents the alleged point of view of the sophisticated elites that Hollywood wants to cater to. So that's why it's presented as an editorial.
With that established, let's dive into this Atlantic editorial. It begins by praising the original Star Wars for being so visceral and immersive, before stating, "Right now, Star Wars is at a turning point. Lucas' original vision famously inspired an era of big-budget blockbuster movies whose creators, just as famously, eventually ran out of new ideas and came to rely on sequels and spin-offs. Inevitably, Star Wars itself succumbed to that fate. In 2012, Lucas sold his franchise to Disney, Hollywood's chief recycler of old stories."
And the use of the word inevitably is interesting because it wasn't inevitable, the events that happened. George Lucas had said for decades that he hated the studio system. That's why he had used the wealth that he earned from the toy rights of the original movie to finance his own projects thereafter, right? And stayed out of the studio system. And so it is one of the great mysteries for which I don't have an answer, and I don't know that anyone does besides Mr. Lucas, as to why he chose to sell his baby, his life's legacy, to the ultimate studio system, which is Disney, right? And so it is not inevitable. But the way that this article is presenting it is that this was an inevitable historical process, which suggests that the events that are now going to be promoted by the article as to what should come next would also be inevitable.
Yeah, the article even classifies Disney as Hollywood's chief recycler of old stories.
Which is not what it used to be. Disney was the innovator initially, right? It innovated filmmaking, it innovated technology, it innovated storytelling. Under Mr. Iger's reign, it became a regurgitator of its own material, right? It just went back and did live action versions of its own classic, innovative programs. And so I noticed that in the article as well, when this writer said that, that's what Disney has become under Iger, and suggesting now that maybe it can be a post-Iger version now.
Fresh Star Wars films began to roll out in 2015. Though early acclaim and profits were impressive, creative troubles began to hurt the bottom line. In 2019, dismayed reviews and relatively soft ticket sales greeted the rise of Skywalker.
So it said two important things there. One is that there were creative issues in the process, and then it jumps to the end, which is the rise of Skywalker, which had dismal reviews. Notice that it glosses over the pivotal turn, which is The Last Jedi, because this entire article, and we'll go further into it as we go into it, this entire article is passive aggressive and shining the spotlight around everything except the thing that you want to talk about in order to highlight the thing that you want to talk about.
The Atlantic then continues. Around that time, Disney's CEO Bob Iger announced a movie-making hiatus for Star Wars. Had Lucas Galaxy lost its power, or had its new stewards simply mismanaged it?
And the answer, of course, is the latter. Whenever you present a or B, the answer is always the B, right? And that's what you do rhetorically. And so you're presenting, this is what you think it was, which is that it's lost its mojo. but B, is it really this? And that's rhetorically what they're doing, which is mismanagement.
Exactly, and they actually make that point too, because then they contrast everything that Disney did with the Star Wars movies with The Mandalorian. Article says, the recent success of a remarkable Star Wars television series suggests the latter, i.e. that the stewards mismanaged it.
Mm-hmm.
When the streaming service Disney Plus launched in late 2019, it featured The Mandalorian, which picks up 5 years after the events of the original trilogy and follows the adventures of a mysterious mercenary who has sworn never to take off his helmet. By the end of season 2, a critical consensus had emerged. It was the best live-action Star Wars product to arrive since the early 1980s.
So let's stop there. By the end of season 2 is what the article says. I think that consensus was there in the first few episodes of season 1, right? And so the fact that they say by the end of season 2, what happens at the end of season 2? Luke Skywalker returns, right? And essentially at least presents the possibility of unraveling what had been done to his character in the previous, Disney sequel films. And so very specific use of rhetoric there.
After establishing that The Mandalorian is the best Star Wars since the original trilogy, The Atlantic points out the unique structural connection between the two. The plot of The Mandalorian unspools like a thin, near-invisible thread. Each week, the protagonist completes a discrete quest that unobtrusively points the way towards the next quest. The pleasure of watching lies very much in the journey and not the destination. This episodic, open-ended style of entertainment is a hallmark of dramatic TV, but it's also very Star Wars.
Yes, because Star Wars, as Lucas has said, is based on sort of the original serials that he saw, the Saturday morning serials that he would watch of Buck Rogers and things like that, and they would spool out in this fashion, a discrete adventure that sets up a cliffhanger and keeps moving, and that's what the original trilogy was, and so it's what they're doing there is laying out almost as if they're talking to children how storytelling should be done, because we've had the storytelling in Star Wars so badly confused in the past decade that this basic format has to be re-explained.
Re-explain it they do, as they quote George Lucas himself, describing the original Star Wars as, "It's always been what you might call a good man in search of a story," before clarifying that what Lucas meant by that was when conceiving Star Wars, he dreamed first of visuals, concepts, and feelings, not of plot. The Atlantic then explores how he used tropes of mythological storytelling to string together a cohesive narrative.
So basically, they talk about the importance of the feelings, the mise-en-scene, that the world is lived in, and the world becomes lived in through the characters and the character moments.
What they're not saying, what they are specifically saying is not part of that, is political ideology. It is utilizing character for an agenda, and so that they're not there by drawing the spotlight all around the problem. They're now highlighting the problem by not saying it,
and then they bring it right back to the problem by explicitly contrasting both what The Mandalorian and the original trilogy did to what Disney did.
Mm-hmm.
Editorial reads, Disney's chief Star Wars executive, Kathleen Kennedy, says that what was really important to Lucas, and certainly important to me, was story. Then, is the opinion of the writer, whenever Star Wars films have faltered with audiences, commentators have blamed shoddy storytelling.
So let's stop there, because this is brilliant rhetorical argumentation here. Now, people have criticized this as a very fluffy piece with a lot of faux poetry, which it is, but all the poetry is being used to cover what's being said here. And so here, the only time Ms. Kennedy is mentioned is here. And she is mentioned in a way to damn herself, because he's laid out already what Lucas's approach to storytelling was. Then he says, Miss Kennedy says this about Lucas, and the story is the most important thing. And then it goes on to say, well, the story clearly didn't work. So that is praise through lack of saying out loud. It's literally setting her up to condemn herself.
And to emphasize that, he also brings Lucas and his prequels a little bit into the fray there.
Mm-hmm. Well,
by
yeah,
saying,
that's part of the sleight of hand that's being done here. So that if it's only a commentary on Disney Star Wars, there's only one person to blame for that, right? And so you have to add in, well, and it's a safe way to do it because many people criticize the prequels. I think over the past 10 years, many have come to appreciate the prequels based on what we saw subsequently. But nonetheless, that's a safe way to do it. And so he's not going to get a phone call from Kathleen Kennedy's lawyer saying, you're defaming her. He's like, it's a general commentary about how Star Wars got off the wrong path after the original trilogy, when we know what he's trying to say.
Exactly. So he criticizes the prequels, and then he criticizes the Disney sequels, saying that they amounted to another chosen one tale. The flaws of their scripts, meaning the Disney sequel scripts, have been rightly scrutinized. But fixing those flaws would not solve the more fundamental failures of execution. When Star Wars is bad, its galaxy feels like a thing on a screen, not a place you can go.
Well, and that again is a very interesting choice of phrase, because it's essentially stating someone made a movie rather than a universe, right? Which is Lucas created a universe that you feel could be real, a galaxy far, far away, a long time ago. It could be history, but someone made movies that look like movies and that you don't feel connected to, don't feel real. And we know who that someone is because they've already quoted that someone.
The Atlantic piece then goes on to compare and contrast the movies that were the sequel trilogy to the lived-in world of The Mandalorian, which is being described as sturdy, like well-worn concrete. The hero flies a rickety spaceship modeled on a 70s warplane. Baby Yoda's twitching puppet ears convey the expressive range of actual toddlers. Most important, the showrunner, Jon Favreau, has absorbed the take-your-time exploratory ethos of Lucas' first trilogy.
And now he's done the rhetorical thing of he presented the villain by name. Now he's presenting the hero that fixes the villain's problem by name. So Mr. Favreau has to come second in this kind of rhetorical setup. So the hero is coming in to solve the problems created by the villain. So he's now named. So that's what this article is about.
The Atlantic piece continues talking up how The Mandalorian effectively is a new hope for Star Wars, as it, in some sense, is as real as the original trilogy, before concluding, to cheer for a Hollywood product that emphasizes look and feel rather than story and character may sound superficial. But in life, aesthetics are not incidental. The dents on a vehicle tell a story.
Well, and when we say the dents on the vehicle, we now again are making this commentary that Ms. Kennedy attempted to create a new Star Wars, which was shiny and new, reflecting her own vision and perhaps her own personality and sense of self. And George Lucas is a man who's lived a long life, who has struggled through life. He wrote Star Wars after, he became a filmmaker after he had a major life-threatening car accident that essentially put him in bed for months and made him reassess where his life was going. And so he was already the dented figure when he arrived in Hollywood in the 70s and started creating this incredible body of work. And so these are commentaries about lived experience versus Hollywood flash, which has no dents, and which Miss Kennedy represents.
There is one final element to this Atlantic story, although it is somewhat outside of it. At this point in time, there are no new Star Wars shows about to premiere on Disney+, nor have there been any major Star Wars news to tie this into. So why publish this Atlantic piece now?
Well, that's the question of the day, because there is nothing in the news that we can see that would support this article appearing with this kind of detailed attack and on the previous direction of Star Wars and an embrace of a new creator and a new direction, which suggests to me that there are things happening behind the scenes that are very profound. When I came on Midnight's Edge several months ago, I predicted the events that would happen because once Miss Carano had arranged for the firing of once Miss Kennedy had arranged for the firing of Miss Carano, I knew that her reign had come to an end. I knew she had crossed a line that had gone too far. A beloved actress who had a very strong support base and who was seen as a fighter who would not back down. I knew she had come across an adversary that it was a mistake to take on. And so I come on to Midnight's Edge at the time, and I said, what we're going to see is we're going to see the beginning of the end, and we're going to see that play out in the news. And we have seen that play out in the news. So each step has been something that has been part of the strategic process of removing Ms. Kennedy, and doing so without lawsuit, without drama, and without media people claiming that Bob Chapek is a sexist who came after a powerful woman. Right? So each step served a purpose. The first step was the Forbes article, which gave Bob Chapek the cover to do what was necessary to be done, right? As I said at Midnight's Edge at the time, that now he can say, it's time for me to start shaking heads and establish myself as CEO and clean house because my reputation is on the line by a Forbes article that he may himself have instigated. The next step would be so it's like a 3-act structure. So first step is Act 1. So that was the Forbes article. Second act is the Hollywood Reporter article that came out several months ago, or several weeks ago, really, which again seemed to come out of nowhere. But here's this lengthy article about how Bob Chapek is beating heads in the industry and retaking control and pissing off people, establishing he's the alpha male. Okay, so that was where the events that had been set in motion by Forbes were now being revealed to the public, that he's going ahead and doing what I said he would do, which is he would start putting up pressure on particularly Ms. Kennedy and Lucasfilm, which was the problem because Marvel and the other things, Pixar that Disney controls, are not the problem. And now we're seeing Act 3 here. So the reason Act 3 here, which is now the general populace article, The Atlantic, which reflects the intellectuals and the East Coast cocktail party crowd. Why is this coming out? I believe it's because we've gone through Act 3, which is the deal is done. My belief is that this article has come out because they have reached some kind of settlement with Ms. Kennedy to have her move on to the sunset. The problem, my instinct is what they'll do is she will retire with much glory and fanfare and much praise at the end of this year from Lucasfilm. She will continue on as executive producer on Indiana Jones, and they will focus all their attention on how great Indiana Jones is going to be under her leadership. So they're giving her the cover to move on from Star Wars with dignity. And so that is why I believe this was put out there at this time. It's because the matter has been resolved legally. It's all been signed away. And now they have to prepare the industry, not just because what were the stages of it? There's problems at Disney, stage 1. Bob Chapek is butting heads at stage 2, right? And stage 3, which is this article, is what is the solution to the problems? It is this other vision and this other gentleman, which is Jon Favreau. So they've now set up the successor vision, which means that the movie has come to an end. And now we're seeing the sequel being prepared, and we're seeing the finale and the climax. And now the next movie is going to be where Mr. Jon Favreau is going to take Star Wars on The Mandalorian. Whether he receives an official title, Lucasfilm, I don't know. I don't care. This article has established that it is his vision that's going to be the new movie moving forward for Star Wars. And so it's brilliant Hollywood storytelling playing out in front of us, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. And none of it is being done in a way that is obvious to the public. And that is why there's been some controversy in the fandom in particular, because these events are being done in true advertising fashion to manipulate the populace with something it does not fully see and does not understand. This is sleight of hand. And so people are expecting that the magician will reveal their tricks and are getting upset when that's not how it plays out. But that's sleight of hand. And so that's what we're watching here. But the basic question that you've asked, Andre, which is why now, cannot be answered unless we understand that there's something that has happened behind the scenes. And anyone who believes nothing is happening behind the scenes has no explanation for these series of events that don't have a rational reason to happen without something happening behind the scenes. So that is my view. I think this article represents the end of the journey for Ms. Kennedy. And now, because Jon Favreau is named, and to my memory, I don't recall that Jon Favreau and Mandalorian in the previous two articles that came out in the news media were really emphasized or even mentioned. Here he is mentioned, and this entire article is about how the Mandalorian gets right what everyone else has gotten wrong, and this is going to be the way that Disney and Lucasfilm are going to be moving forward. It's a brilliant 3-act structure. Mr. Chapek should have become a screenwriter, in my opinion.
Do you think this Atlantic article heralds the end for Kathleen Kennedy Star Wars? Are you excited to see what she will do for Indiana Jones now when that may have her full attention? Let me know in the comments, and before you go, remember that to help bypass quarrelsome geo-blocking restrictions and protect your data, you should get Surfshark VPN. Use our code MIDNIGHT to get 83% off, plus 3 extra months for free. Link is in the description.